Hello, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Unrestricted Sports. Today we have a special guest with us, Devin. He is from Heart of Dallas on Instagram. We're also going to link his Instagram or his TikTok down in the description below. So make sure you go check him out. Really cool guy. We've been talking to him for a while now, and he's really chill, and he knows a lot about sports. So obviously, he's someone worth checking out. Today we are talking about the NFC East and what we think the teams in that division's records are going to be. Obviously, Devin is a Cowboys fan, so I'm going to let this one get started. Nolan, what do you have to say about the Cowboys this year?
So I'll start it off with not specifically Cowboys, but the NFC East in general, with just what I think is going to happen in the upcoming season. A very underperforming year, in my opinion, for all the teams, but more specifically, I have the Eagles going 8-8, followed by Cowboys and Giants going 6-10, and then the Redskins in last with 4 wins and 12 losses. I think the biggest shock there isn't how bad the Cowboys are doing. I think it's how high I have the Giants. Just to clear things up on that, I think it's because of their offensive line improvements helping out Saquon and Daniel Jones. But more so, why I have the Cowboys doing so poorly next year is because of their offseason. I think they had a very good offseason for their future, but not to win now, not to win this upcoming season. I know they're the big plus side for the Cowboys, especially defensively, was that bolstering in the D line, or what they think is the bolstering in the D line. The additions of Dontari Poe and Gerald McCoy, I think both of them are uh, big name D tackles. Dontari Poe, I don't think is anything to write home about. Definitely nothing too special there. Just a big name. Don't even know why he's a big name, but is. Statistically speaking, he isn't really even that impressive. On the other hand, you have Gerald McCoy. He's average, in my opinion, at best. It'll be interesting for sure to see how he can do with Demarcus Lawrence and Leighton Vander Esch next to him. I think that'll be super interesting to see if Gerald McCoy doesn't get double teamed, or if Gerald McCoy has the ability to really get to quarterbacks fast and get the sack. Um, uh, but most importantly, I think with the Cowboys is their quarterback situation with Dak. I think Dak, coming off of poor contract negotiations and signing that franchise tag, um, wasn't very smart for him to be asking for that much. And I think in the long run, having Dalton around is probably the better option for the Cowboys if they want to win now. Um, I think Dalton is a more experienced quarterback. I think Dalton's uh, could can do all the same things Dak can do without all the contract drama surrounded around it.
I would say the Dak versus the Dalton situation. I think, in my opinion, I feel like Dak deserves a starting spot, but it's really good to have that reliable backup that if your starter gets injured that you can really rely on. And if you look at Dalton's numbers versus Dak since 2016, Dak outbeats him in yards, touchdowns, interceptions, yards per game, completion percentage, and just record as a starter. Dak is 40-24, and then Andy Dalton's 20-35-1. But I don't hate Andy Dalton by any means. I just think it's Dak's team. I feel like it's his position to be starting on that team. Like I said, Andy Dalton's a great addition. He has the experience that he can definitely help Dak if needed. And then I don't recall who their third string quarterback is. I believe it's going to be Ben DiNucci, quarterback that they just got in the draft. But I do think the addition to Dalton is definitely going to help the team out in the long run.
So, to go back on that, there are some reasons why Andy Dalton's numbers haven't been nearly as good as Dak's.
Yeah, the offensive line, of course.
Yeah, obviously, Cowboys' offensive line and run game is far superior to what Dalton ever had, and even wide receivers is far superior to what Dalton ever worked with in Cincinnati, even when the owners put money into the team. But the last time the owners did put money into the team was when they first drafted Dalton, because that was the first time they really had an incentive to do so, because it was the first time they had any chance of even making the playoffs in a long time. So I'm going to compare Dak's first 4 years in the NFL with Dalton's first 4 years, because that's really when their records are comparable. Both of them made the playoffs twice in their first 4 years. Andy Dalton did so with much better records than Dak. Dak went 13-3 his first season, nothing bad there. 9-7 his next season, misses the playoffs. 10-6 the next year, makes the playoffs. 8-8 next year, misses playoffs. In Dalton's first 4 years, Dalton went 9-7, made the playoffs. 10-6, missed the playoffs with a 10-6 record. 11-5, missed the playoffs with an 11-5 record. 10-5-1, and made the playoffs with that. So in his first 4 years, him and Dak have very similar records. But that's not where the similarity ends, because Dalton also has almost exactly the same overall numbers for those first 4 years in terms of yards, touchdowns, interceptions. Or actually, not interceptions. Interceptions is the only thing Dak is better at not throwing. But in recent years, Dalton's also been getting better at not throwing as many interceptions as well. So that kind of balances out. But we're talking about the first 4 years here. So Dak wins on interceptions thrown. However, in terms of everything else, Dalton has actually been just as good as Dak in his first 4 years. And really the 5th year after that, Dalton went 10-3 as a starter because he wasn't playing all 16 games that year. But they still missed the playoffs again. And so that was really the last year that the team owners put any money into the Bengals for them to try to win. Jerry Jones is the exact opposite. And you look at what Dalton was doing in those years, he was actually, I think every single year, he attempted more passing attempts than Dak, except for one in 2019 when Dak nearly had 600 passing attempts. But overall, in his first 4 years, he's even attempted more passes than Dak. So, where am I going with this, obviously? Dak would obviously be the natural choice for starter. There's no question about that. That's just what makes sense. There's no reason you wouldn't have Dak be your starter. Unless there is problems in that locker room. And what I mean by that is I could very easily see a scenario where Dak is upset because he was a 4th-round draft pick. And so he's been really cheap for 4 years now. He's watched everybody in his draft class get paid an extremely high amount of money for very little performance. And in terms of stats, he's right up there with them for the most part. There's some differences, and you can argue who's better over those differences. But for the most part, he knows he's a starting quality quarterback from that draft. So I could see a scenario where he's mad that he didn't get paid in those 4 years. He's mad that the Cowboys made him wait to the end of his contract. He's mad that he had to sign the franchise tag for financial stability because the Cowboys wouldn't give him a bigger deal. Now, obviously, I don't agree with how much he was asking for reported. As much as Mahomes is not what he's worth. But I could see a scenario where he's still mad that he didn't get the long-term stability that he wanted and had to take the short-term stability because of the pandemic going on right now. And so obviously he had to take that just to make sure that, because there is a risk there. He has to have some level of stability. So he felt the need to sign the franchise tag. But I could very easily see a scenario where Dak is a problem in the locker room because he's not happy about that. I would be unhappy about that. Now, that's not to say that Dak will be a problem in the locker room, first of all. I think Dak is a good leader, personally. I think he's a likable guy. I think a lot of people in that locker room like him. But that could just as well go the other way if he's unhappy. You don't want Dak to be unhappy. But if that's the case, putting in Dalton would be the better move if that becomes an issue. Because Dalton is basic. If you look at the first 4 years of their compared careers, which is really when, obviously Jerry Jones has always tried to win, but that's really when the Bengals last tried to win, was the first 4 years of Dalton's own career. Dalton is just as good, if not better, in some of the categories than Dak. So you really have to look at that and say, if something goes wrong here with Dak being upset and it's causing a problem behind closed doors. Not to say that it has been, because I'm not tuned into that locker room, so I don't know. But if it were to happen, that is a solid backup because he's basically Dak. If he had been given the same support throughout his whole career, I guarantee you he would have a far better record than his overall right now, which is a 70-61-2 versus his first, really 5 years in the league, only having one season sub 10 wins. And that season he went 9-7 and still made the playoffs. So that's what I have to say about that. I think Dak
has
should be careful.
Dak has every right to be upset about the contract situation because if you look at Jared Goff and Carson Wentz, they both got extensions from their team, but Dak's stats are significantly better than both of those quarterbacks if you compare like the same categories. So
Careful with that. Careful with that.
I mean, not all of the stats are better, obviously, but the majority of the important categories like yards, touchdowns, interceptions, yards per game, Jared Goff underperforms both Carson Wentz and Dak Prescott.
Here's where. Go ahead. Sorry.
What was I about to say? So, I mean, this year for Dak is definitely a year where he's got to show Jared Jones with his play that he's ready for that extension. And from my understanding, I think what they're disagreeing on isn't really the money part of the contract, it's the length. I think Dak wants a 4-year contract while Dallas wants to give him a 5 years, but Dak wants 4 because as every NFL fan knows, the QB market the price just increases every single year. And so if Dak gets a 4-year contract, he will exit that contract in his prime, and the quarterback market's going to be skyrocketing by then already. So he's looking for the money. He wants money. I think he won't really be an issue in the locker room because I think that he's a winner. He wants to be a winner rather than being an Antonio Brown wanting to be a distraction, something like that.
I'm glad you mentioned the O-line thing. This is not what you just mentioned, but previously. I'm glad you mentioned the strength of the Cowboys O-line because the Cowboys O-line is fantastic. Dak Prescott had the seventh greatest amount of time to throw the ball before pressure got to him. Here's where I'll bring this stat up in favor of Wentz, though. Wentz had the 11th least amount of time in the pocket, if that makes any sense at all. Which it isn't that much of a separation. It's like, 0.2 seconds. But at that point, every millisecond counts. And I think in terms of contract pay with quarterbacks in Dak's draft class, I'm going to negate Jared Goff. I think Jared Goff is a non-factor, really, and I think he's pretty bad for the contract that he got. But in terms of Carson Wentz's contract, I think Carson Wentz got overpaid, which unfortunately for the Cowboys is going to lead to Dak Prescott getting overpaid. Dak deserves the money because Carson Wentz got paid and Jared Goff got paid. So Dak definitely deserves the money. But in terms of talent, I would say Carson Wentz definitely would deserve more than Dak by any stretch of the imagination. Carson Wentz, although battling injury his entire career, has had zero significant receiving help. Alshon Jeffrey is his most notable receiver. Obviously, Zach Ertz. But wide receiver-wise, Alshon Jeffrey is really his biggest threat there. And Nelson Aguilar can't catch any balls. Deshaun Jackson was hurt last season. I mean, you look at the Eagles last season, and they were brutal the entire season. Injury after injury after injury. But they still won the division, I think, at 8-8, tied with the Cowboys. And with the Eagles getting significantly better, getting a healthy wide receiver core, their O-line, statistically speaking, is bad, but it's pretty much the same O-line they had in that Super Bowl. Their defense obviously got way better. Adding Darius Slay is huge. So I think the biggest thing, and this is responding more so to Dalton and Dak, is how inconsistent Dak can be. Not that he is all the time, but his ability to be inconsistent is what bothers me. And I think that's why they probably brought Dalton in, is with his new coaching staff and the possibilities that this coaching staff has, I think having Dalton there is a very good option. One case that's very popular is Dak without Zeke, and Dak without Zeke is non-existent. Dak is trash without Zeke. It'll be interesting to see how the offense changes with new coaching staff and stuff like that. But like I said, I can't foresee this season going well for the Cowboys compared to how the Eagles' offseason went.
And touching a little bit on like the new coaching staff, when Mike McCarthy went into the interview with Jerry Jones, my theory is that he told Jerry, he was like, "These are all the coaches that I want to bring in," and Jerry was all for it because a week within Mike McCarthy getting hired, he had an entire new coaching staff other than offensive coordinator and Kellen Moore. But what caught my eye was in 2010 when he led the Packers to a Super Bowl win, being the 6th seed in the playoffs. The Packers had the ninth ranked offense and the 5th best defense. If you look at Dallas's ranks last year, 1st ranked offense, 9th ranked defense. So that tells me if Mike McCarthy can take a 9th ranked offense to the Super Bowl and win, I think that he can definitely do the same in Dallas, especially with all the talent that Dallas has and has brought in this offseason.
So there is one thing that I want to say. I have both the Eagles and the Cowboys going 8-8, with the Eagles winning the division because that's just who I'm giving the tiebreaker to. I think the other two members, the Giants and the Redskins, are kind of irrelevant in the whole division right now. But I will say this: that the reason I give the Eagles the edge, one, I'm a Lions fan, and I've seen Darius Slay play. Listen, Darius Slay should not have had to leave because Matt Patricia didn't think he was elite. Because believe it or not, Darius Slay is elite. He's the best He was one of the best players on the defensive side of the ball that Detroit has had in a long time. We're going to have a bad time next year without him. With that being said, he's going to be a pain for quarterbacks in the NFC East. An absolute pain. It's not going to be good for them.
That's where I see a huge issue, actually, and I didn't mention this earlier. That's where I see a huge issue with the Cowboys. And I want to get your opinion on this for sure, Devin. But
All right.
Your secondary, losing Byron Jones, obviously big loss for you guys, replacing him with Trayvon Diggs. Personally, I don't think Trayvon Diggs should be a starting cornerback. Obviously, he could prove me wrong. I hope he does. I was a little upset the Bears didn't take him, but I think Trayvon Diggs could definitely be a very good cornerback in the league. I just don't see him being a good starter for Dallas right away, especially with who else they have in their secondary. It's a very young secondary, besides Clinton Dix. Most of these guys I really haven't heard of. But my main question to you is with Byron Jones gone, Byron Jones was definitely the voice of that cornerback and secondary room. Do you think that's what Clinton Dix was brought in for, or do you think Chidobe Awuzie or whatever is going to have that ability to lead that secondary? And in addition to that, do you think having Byron Jones there led other players in that Cowboys secondary to produce well? And do you think without him they can still produce at that high level?
I would definitely agree in terms of Byron being that leader in the defensive backs position, especially with all the young guys that Dallas has at the position. But I feel like the addition to Clinton Dix was for two reasons. One, yes, as a leader, and two, he has chemistry with head coach Mike McCarthy. When he played it in Green Bay, where's this thing at? 522 tackles in his time so far in the NFL. He's been to the Redskins and what other team was it?
Clinton Dix, Bears.
Yeah, Bears. Okay. But I think his veteran presence in the locker room at the defensive backs position is definitely going to be a good thing. I think it could significantly be better than what Byron Jones had. But Trayvon Diggs, I think that's also a great addition considering he's from Alabama, so he got coached by Nick Saban. I don't think he'll be a starter immediately, but he might be. I don't know. But I could see him being a great third and fourth down secondary player. But I do think the departure of Byron Jones is gonna hurt a little. But then they also got Reggie Robinson out of Tulsa. He's not going to be much of a factor. He's definitely not going to be a starter. They also got Maurice Kennedy. He doesn't have a really big stat line, but I do think that HaHa Clinton Dix, along with the addition to Daryl Worley, another veteran, is definitely going to improve the secondary, considering that we don't have Byron Jones anymore.
So there is one thing I want to point out here, and that is that with the current state of meetings and off-season training camps for players, there hasn't been a lot of time for McCarthy to really create chemistry with this team. Now, that being said, there have been rookie coaches in the NFL who have done exceedingly well in their first year in the league. But Mike McCarthy isn't a rookie head coach. People kind of know what he's going to try to do in Dallas, or at least a variant of it. Now, unless he completely changed how he calls games when he took a year off to, quote-unquote, learn the new offensive system, because that's kind of why he left in the first place, that people said he was outdated. So he left and tried to figure out the current system, and he said he was working with people and all that stuff. Okay, that's all cool, but I don't think he's going to drastically change because of that, first of all. But secondly, people are going to know what he's going to do. So he isn't just necessarily a rookie head coach, because obviously he's not. He's a Super Bowl head coach, but people know what he does. So there is that issue of, with the Zoom meetings right now, that he hasn't had the normal interactions with the team that he would have otherwise had that helped build that chemistry preseason. So
I agree.
Could that be a benefit? Maybe. It could be, there's a lot of people who are going to have that issue, but Mike McCarthy's in a particularly bad spot because the Cowboys really need to be competing for a deep playoff run this year. And, that maybe that's unfair for him just getting back into the league, but that's really what they're going for here. That's why they hired him, because they needed an upgraded coach. I think giving 2 years would be more fair to him, but part of the reason why I have the Cowboys going 8-8 is because Doug Peterson, everyone on that team knows Doug Peterson. They've been on that team for a while. Those who they brought in are going to be informed by those who are already on the team how the culture there works, and they're going to have that reinforced to them. On the other hand, Mike McCarthy, there's a few people who know him from his time in Green Bay, but besides those guys who are going to try to help him out, that being said, maybe they don't want to help him out because maybe they didn't like his culture, but we don't know that. Obviously, that's just speculation there. But given that, he's in a bad spot, and that's why I have the Eagles and Cowboys both at 8-8, but the Eagles have the edge because the Eagles just seem to have the edge in everything. They have the better defensive players. They have the better wide receivers now, or not the better wide receivers. I would say that definitely goes to the Cowboys, but they have pretty much everything they need to beat out the Cowboys. I think
that's why I have them going 6-10 this season with the Giants. The Eagles got better this offseason significantly, all around the field. The Cowboys,
and they were already able to beat the Cowboys before that too.
And the Cowboys have a good roster. Their offense is very similar to last year. Obviously added a wide receiver 3 in CeeDee Lamb. I think he's the best receiver in the draft class. That'll be super interesting to see him with Cooper and Gallup. But my problem is that Eagles offense, who I think is your biggest threat to win that division, got significantly better, like I said. And your defense, in my opinion, with the loss of Byron Jones, got significantly worse, unless Trayvon Diggs can really show out as a rookie. And I think you have to you're looking for a rookie of the year defensively type of play out of Diggs if you're going to contend and make the playoffs in the NFC especially. I don't think that the additions, like I've said, of McCoy and Poe are so big that the loss of Byron Jones is okay. I think that Carson Wentz is going to shred your secondary unless some unforeseen coaching changes result in some very good zone defense or or secondary play. But it'll definitely be interesting to see how the Cowboys are able to adapt in the secondary for sure.
So when Brendan was talking about coaching, I want to note on Mike McCarthy. He coached Green Bay for 13 years, and he made the playoffs 9 out of those 13 years. And his playoff record's 10-8 with one Super Bowl win, which I'll mention he won in Dallas. So I think, in going back to when Mike McCarthy went into that interview with Jerry Jones, had all those coaches told him, "These are who I'm going to hire." I almost guarantee you, he contacted every single one of those coaches, and he's like, "If I get signed to a contract as a head coach, I want you here." I want to note he got in Mike Nolan, defensive coordinator, and then his defensive line coach is John Tomsula, and then defensive backs coach Maurice Linguiste and Al Harris. Now, I don't know. I hear Mike Nolan's really good, but I haven't really done any research on Maurice or Al. So that'll be interesting to see how the defensive backs go. But I think that if you look statistically, first-year head coaches don't do typically as good as they do in the next years after that. But I think it's to get Mike McCarthy. He's got playoff experience. He's got head coaching experience in general. It's a lot better than getting a college head coach such as Lincoln Riley or Urban Meyer, who personally I was kind of hoping we would get with Urban Meyer because you see what he did at Ohio State. But I was really happy that they got Mike McCarthy. I'm excited to see how it plays out. I think that he helped develop Aaron Rodgers into his skill like that he is today. I think that he'll do really good things with Dak along the line.
Hopefully not also his personality for you guys.
I'm kidding.
But I would like to point out, when I'm talking about this idea of team cohesion, all that stuff, I'm not talking about within the coaching staff, because obviously I think they're going to be just fine. The idea between the coaching staff is going to be relatively the same. I'm more concerned about how the players are going to come together underneath their new head coach, who they don't really even know that well. That's what I'm more concerned about, because the coaching staff is obviously going to be on the same page. The players might not be. Speaking from experience, your coach can have a different idea from really good players, and the coach ultimately has the power to mess a good team's roster up.
Jason freaking Garrett, scream his name.
I was thinking more Matt Patricia, because you guys just, you guys saw what happened to us. We went from being a 9-7 team, making the playoffs most years, to really bad records. But with that being said, I do think that if you had to get a coach, I'm kind of torn on who they should have gone with, because obviously there are college coaches who could have come up and really rocked the league with their style, I think, because they're just that successful. It's not like other college coaches in the past, because most college coaches who come up to the NFL, most of the time they aren't the really good head coaches, because most head coaches in college who are really good make just as much as a NFL contract anyway. Mm-hmm. But if they had to choose someone and the other two college coaches really weren't that interested, then I would say that he's a good pickup. But keep in mind, there are some people who say he's just a slightly better Jason Garrett. And that being said, I did kind of see it, because, obviously the Lions played him for a number of years, so obviously I saw those games. A more competent team would have won those games, because there was a mix of Lions getting screwed over by the refs, which, for those of you who don't know, because you don't watch Lions football because the Lions are irrelevant, the Lions always get screwed over by the refs. It doesn't matter who we're playing. We always just bad call after bad call. But watching Mike McCarthy coach, he should have had a lot of those games in the bag. Some of them he did not. And that's because his play style was very predictable especially towards the end of his time in Green Bay. He got extremely predictable. He was very old school offense, very old school offense. And that's part of the reason why Aaron Rodgers kicked him out, was because he was upset that, him and Mike McCarthy didn't see eye to eye on the offense. So, like I said earlier, Mike McCarthy did say he was looking at that while he was, obviously unemployed for this past year. With all of that, maybe he has, mixed some stuff in there that's going to throw people off. But I wouldn't hold my breath about it too much, because it's really hard to change your whole play calling style especially that late into your career.
And so you were talking about Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy. I think Aaron Rodgers is the type of quarterback who likes to call his own, whereas I think Dak Prescott, especially with Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator, I think that Dak Prescott would be like, all right, I trust Kellen. I think he'll call good plays, because last season it was the Cowboys' play calling for offense was split between Jason Garrett and Kellen Moore. And me being a Cowboys fan, watching the team for almost 10 years, I can kind of predict what plays were split because of the way they looked, the way they were executed. Also, that's just a player execution. So that when no one says about the Giants thinking their offense is going to be better, it potentially could be, but I think them adding Jason Garrett as offensive coordinator isn't really going to help them much, because, like you said, with Mike McCarthy, Jason Garrett was very predictable in the last few years. So, I mean, the Giants draft class wasn't terrible. They got really good offensive line. Andrew Thomas with first round. Who else they got? They got Matt Pert from UConn round 3. So, I mean, Daniel Jones might see some improvement there. Saquon definitely would be better than Zeke if he had a better O-line. That's just the truth. Me being a Cowboys fan, I have to accept that. But going back to the head coaching, I do think it potentially could be Mike McCarthy being predictable, but then again, I don't think he's really going to be calling the plays.
I think I can't really speak on coaching staffs too much, because obviously a lot can change. Recently, it seems like young head coaches, and not young in age, but young as in just starting out their head coaching careers, and young quarterbacks seem to do well. It seems that in recent memory, you see Matt LaFleur in Green Bay has a very good first season. Matt Nagy has a very good first season with the Bears. Rookie quarterbacks wise, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and I think Daniel Jones last season had a very solid season. Despite that Patriots game, his season was relatively okay considering the lack of O-line that the Giants have. I think, as you've seen, Jason Garrett loves running the ball, and I think with a better O-line, like you said, Saquon is better. So I think it all depends for the Giants, at least. It all depends on how the Giants can utilize Saquon without running him into the ground. Because at times it seemed like Jason Garrett would abuse Zeke to the point where Zeke isn't as fast, or Zeke can't get the first down, yada, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm. And another thing with Jason Garrett is his poor clock management. I'm going to use the game against Minnesota last year as an example. There was like a minute left in the game, right? You have your fourth quarter drive. I believe they started on the 90. It was like 95 yards to the end zone. And Dak arguably had one of the best games of his career that game. He was throwing it, hitting his throws. They're advancing downfield. And then all of a sudden, Jason Garrett just starts running it with Zeke. And then they don't get the first down. They end up, I believe it was like a 4th and 5, 4th and 8, and they don't convert. And that's just poor. I would say, I would want to say poor clock management, just poor decisions overall on Jason Garrett's part.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Jason Garrett is, regardless of what you think of Mike McCarthy, even if he is just an upgraded Jason Garrett, is that it's still an upgraded Jason Garrett. Jason Garrett was not very good for the Cowboys. That being said, I do think there were scenarios where the players didn't play as well as they could have either, and that puts some more pressure on Jason Garrett that necessarily wouldn't have been there had those plays been made. He should have been able to go to Zeke and say, "Hey, run the football now," to kind of throw him off balance. And obviously, I personally wouldn't do that, but I could see the logic behind it. They might be expecting Dak to throw, that sort of thing. And you should be able to rely on a guy like Zeke who's getting paid big bucks to run the football. But that being said, I still wouldn't do it personally. So I can see scenarios. There are scenarios where, Jason Garrett would not be getting as much pressure had certain plays been made. But then again, that's some issue of motivation. And, obviously Jerry Jones eventually fired Jason Garrett because it was kind of obvious that Jason Garrett didn't know how to motivate a football team.
And he never took accountability, honestly, for his poor decision making. He always just blamed it on the players. And granted, maybe sometimes it was the players' fault, but there were times where it was all on him, and he didn't take accountability for it.
Yeah, that is something too. Is that there's a way to call out players in press conferences. I don't know if you guys ever watched a Bill Belichick conference, but there's a way to do it that isn't going to completely demoralize the player and kind of take off the team. And Jason Garrett doesn't seem to get how to do that, to be perfectly honest. It didn't seem like he knew how to do that very well. So when he wouldn't take any responsibility for himself, and then on top of that, he's criticizing players in a way that isn't really an effective way to do it if you're going to do it in a press conference. That being said, I don't think he was a good coach in that regard either. So,
Nolan, I want to ask you a question real quickly.
Yeah, go for it.
So, the Eagles, right? Pick 53 in the second round. They got quarterback Jalen Hurts. I know you like Oklahoma. I want to ask you, do you think that Jalen Hurts potentially, either this season or next season, would replace Carson Wentz as a starter for the Eagles?
Probably not. I think probably not for the Eagles, I'll say. He was brought in, I think, definitely as a Taysom Hill type of player, or to fill that sort of role. I think the Eagles are pretty high on Nate Sudfeld, on being Wentz's replacement if Wentz gets hurt. I think Wentz is definitely on the replacement block if he cannot stay healthy and continue to play at a high level. I think Jalen Hurts would have been a very good quarterback given time to start. Not on a team that wants to contend right away, but maybe a rebuilding situation. And I don't know, it would have been interesting to maybe see him in like a Miami situation or something like that. But Jalen Hurts on the Eagles, I don't think will ever be a starting quarterback for them. I think he'll be a very rare, odd situation quarterback for them, but by no means a full-time starter for them.
See, I personally see them bringing in Jalen Hurts as a backup for a playoff caliber quarterback who they can trust in the playoffs. That's what I think they were still nearly winning that playoff game with who did they bring in as their backup in that game when
was it Nick Foles? Nick Foles?
No. Last season.
Oh, oh my God, I forget his name. Keep talking, I'll figure it out.
Yeah, he was a career backup, and he was nearly winning that game. It was really crazy to see. Like, people thought we were seeing the next Nick Foles for a minute there in the game, but then ultimately the more healthy team won out because their offensive line kept letting them get hit, and from there it started to go downhill. But with that being said, they were still nearly winning that football game. I thought they were going to win that football game. And now if you bring in a really good backup QB for if Carson Wentz gets hurt, that's a good move for the Eagles organization, actually. I know that the fan base hates it. I personally hate it because I think that shouldn't be the role that Jalen Hurts has to play. But in terms of if they really are worried about that for the playoffs, it's a good move for the organization. Now, I still personally, I absolutely hate this because it's not fair to either quarterback to have to deal with that. Because Jalen Hurts comes in for a few games, does really well, and then Carson Wentz's first time back from those games or from those plays, and people are going to be, when he does anything wrong, the fans are going to say, well, Jalen Hurts wouldn't have done that. Jalen Hurts would have won the game. Jalen Hurts would have won a Super Bowl. That sort of thing. If that scenario happens again, that same Nick Foles situation, that's not fair to either quarterback. Carson Wentz does not deserve to have that happen to him. And neither does Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is a starter quarterback in his own right. He shouldn't have to sit behind Carson Wentz. And the Eagles really shouldn't have drafted a guy who's that good. Just ethically, it feels wrong to me that he has to sit behind Dak and wait. It doesn't feel right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. By the way, the quarterback was Josh McCown.
Oh God,
career backup, obviously.
Yeah.
But
how many teams has he been to? Like 10?
Several, yeah. But just wrapping things up here, I think after this we should get our last thoughts in. But in terms of Jalen Hurts backing up Carson Wentz, I don't think Jalen Hurts would be a very good option to back him up. I think Jalen Hurts, it's proven from his time in Alabama and then switching to Oklahoma that Jalen Hurts needs time in a system to do well, to win. Did very well in Oklahoma, don't get me wrong, but it took him a season or two in Alabama to really get them, for him to do very well in that system. And I don't think, come playoff time, if Carson Wentz goes down, that Jalen Hurts should step in and try to win them that game. I think I would love to see it happen. Eagles-wise and coaching staff-wise, I think they would go with Nate Sudfeld over Jalen Hurts. But then again, it'll definitely be interesting to see how Doug Peterson utilizes a Jalen Hurts type of player.
Yeah, I mean, either way, it's not fair to either quarterback.
Yes, I agree.
It just feels wrong. It's like a Josh Rosen situation, a quarterback with a lot of talent who just gets passed around between teams.
Yeah.
And never really gets the chance to start because they're like, oh, well, he doesn't have any experience and he's getting older now.
100% agree.
Yeah, Josh Rosen's. This is only. How long has Josh Rosen been in the league now?
I think he got drafted. When did he get drafted?
I think it was 2017 when he got drafted.
That's what I want to say.
I think it's been 3 seasons.
So 3 years he's been passed around to 3 teams. That's there should be. I personally think there should be NFL rules against that. But there's no way you could ever make a rule like that fair to the team either. So it's not like it's ever going to go through.
He's never had. Go ahead,
sorry.
No, go for it.
All right. Going back to the Eagles and their backup situation, I would have liked to see him. This is in the best interest of Jalen Hurts. I would like to see the Eagles rather get Jake Fromm out of Georgia for the backup position. I feel like he fits the backup better than Jalen Hurts does because I think Jalen Hurts should be a starter immediately on whatever team, just not the Eagles because they got Carson Wentz, and if he gets hurt, you got Jake Fromm, you got Nate Sudfeld. I don't know what team I would like to see Jalen Hurts on, but one, I would hate to see him on the Eagles because I liked him, but now he's a freaking Eagle, so I can't really root for him. But I do think he's a starting quarterback. He's got the talent if he hasn't shown that in college already. I feel like if he did start, though, however, I think he would have more like a Dak Prescott scenario where he just absolutely takes the league by storm first year, but then the next year, sophomore slump hits him. He doesn't do as great. But maybe I'll be wrong. I guess we won't even get to see it really because he's not going to start at Philly, I don't think. You never know, though, honestly.
Well, I mean, Wentz has been hurt every year to some extent, so.
True.
But back to the main topic. In terms of the NFC East, like I said, 8-8 for both the Eagles and Cowboys, but the Eagles are going to win the division because I'm giving them the tiebreak right now.
I gotta make it different. Cowboys going 12-4, are gonna win the division.
4.
That's mine. All right, if this makes no one feel any better, I have Dallas losing to Giants in Week 17.
Yeah, that's because their starters aren't playing, I bet.
Yeah, because they're gonna sit their starters for the playoffs because they got a first round bye. Divisional round.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
All right, well, it's been fun having you on. Once again, Heart of Dallas on Instagram. We're going to leave him linked in the description below. Also, his TikTok will be in the description down below. That's where his main platform is. It was fun having you over. But make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps out the channel because this is a longer video, so those kind of get pushed down in YouTube's algorithm a little bit. But if you guys like and sub and everything, it helps out the channel a lot. So it helps these longer videos out. Once again, make sure you check out Devin. Really cool dude. And we will see you guys next time. Peace.